Hi, I wanted to show you a problem with modern digital oscilloscopes where you could potentially come a gutter, just like I did recently, and even I was fooled by this. Even though I knew about it, I simply forgot to take it into account when I was doing some measurements recently. So what I've got here is just a basic DC signal, 10 volts coming from my power supply. I'm 2 volts per division here, and I can switch this on or off like this. That's it, right? And I've got a trigger point just right in the middle there. There's nothing fancy with the trigger coupling. It's just set to DC here. There's no noise reject or hold off or anything, right? So it's a pretty simple thing. In my case, I just want basic edge triggering. When it goes from 0 to 10 volts here, positive edge, I want it to trigger. And that's it. So that's pretty easy, right? We're at 100 milliseconds per division here. I press my single shot button like that, and I turn on my power supply, and Bob's your uncle, right? I can do this all day long. Press single shot, and then boom, I trigger every single time. Look at that, easy. But what happens if I want to go to a slower time base? Let's say 1 second per division here, okay? It's not radically slow, but if I press the single button like this and I set my output, you can see it, 10 volts, it hasn't triggered. What? Why? Why has it not triggered? We're in single shot mode, exactly the same as before, and I went from 0 to 10 volts, you saw it, and it didn't trigger. What's going on? Well, the trick here is that the oscilloscope had not armed itself yet, because modern digital scopes, this one's no different, it's the same as every other scope. If our trigger point is in the middle here, then we have what's called 50% pre-trigger data and 50% post-trigger data. That will vary if you move your horizontal along like that. You can actually change that, but assuming that it's in the middle, like you know, by default you might have that, then yeah, 50% pre, 50% post. And you can actually see the data right there. See? It's actually sweeping across like that. So effectively, as soon as you press that single shot button there, what it's doing is it starts sampling 50% pre-data, and at 1 second per division, that actually takes 5 seconds. And that is the pre-arm period. So the oscilloscope is not armed to trigger for 5 seconds after you press that single period, or that's the plan anyway, and then after that it can. So I've been yapping on for like 20 seconds here. Okay, I can now do that and trigger just fine because it's now armed itself. But the trick is, where does the oscilloscope tell you on the front panel here or on the display that it's actually, whether or not it's actually armed, ready for that trigger? So what I'll do is I'll press single and I'll start my timer here, and you have a look at this scope and see if you can tell at what point it becomes armed. It should do it after 5 seconds, right? Let's go. See if you can pick it. Can you pick it? Should be armed by now, right? 5 seconds. Can you pick it? Can you pick it yet? Trust me, it's there, but it's totally non-obvious. And this is what I forgot about while I was doing my testing, because there wasn't an obvious indicator that it was armed for a trigger. Let me try that again, okay? So we start it after 5 seconds, okay, at 1 millisecond per division. It should now, so I will now set the output. I'll go like that, and it does do it. But what? So it did do it as expected, but it hadn't actually shown the armed indicator yet. I'll put you out of your misery. I'll show you where it is. On the Keysight scope, we'll push single here, and watch here. It says triggered, apostrophe D, okay, and the armed indicator, wait for it, wait for it, wait for it, it turns to triggered with a question mark after it. That is the armed indicator. But if you go back and replay that clip I just showed you, I was able to trigger it before that armed indicator question mark turned up. And I'll put up the manual here for this triggered armed indicator feature, and you can see that it says triggered without the question mark is when the pre-fill buffer is being filled. So that pre-trigger buffer is being filled and it's not able to actually trigger. But you saw it in the previous clip, we were able to trigger it before that question mark turned up, after that 5-second period as we got on the display. But the question mark hadn't showed up yet. And the manual says when the question mark appears, that is when the pre-trigger or pre-filled buffer is done and it's ready to be triggered. So, like, what the hell's going on there? And, like, what? They couldn't be bothered to put, like, the word armed there or something, or ready or something like that, and make it, like, green and then red when it's being pre-filled or something like that? No, they've got this piddly little question mark here. And if you don't know how to use your scope and you're not aware that your scope is not armed and ready to trigger, then you could, in my case, I was manually triggering things, expecting it to capture it, and I was getting no capture whatsoever. And you'll notice that that triggered without the question mark has two actual meanings. It can mean that your signal is actually triggered, like in this particular case, like we can actually trigger it like that, and you'll see it turned from the question mark back to that, and our waveform has popped up and it's triggered. So it has that two meanings of both being triggered and also sitting there unarmed waiting for that pre-fill buffer. It's like the same thing indicates both? Like, what? Why? So it actually takes 10 seconds in this particular case at 1 second per division. It'll be longer, correspondingly longer at longer time bases, but 5 seconds, it's already armed, but it hasn't shown, and boom, it popped up at the 10-second mark there, that question mark. But it's totally non-obvious that there's this trigger dead time in there while your scope is pre-filling that buffer. And as I said, it's going to be longer if you actually move this over. So let's try that. So I'll move this all the way over here like this, and we expect it to now take 9 seconds to pre-fill that buffer there. Let's give that a go. Okay, here we go. So it'll take 9 seconds to pre-fill that, but for some reason this Keysight takes twice that time period. In this case, yeah, it hasn't gone yet. There's no question mark. It should take 18 seconds. Well, no, there it is. It took 15. Why did it take 15 when there was an extra 4 there? It's non-linear. Yeah, okay, it might have some extra buffer outside this window in that direction perhaps, but why does it take twice as long? It's crazy. So I'll do that again, and we've still got our trigger point right out over here. I'll turn my output on after 5 seconds. No, it's not triggering. No, 8, 9 seconds, 9 seconds it was able to start triggering, and sure enough, it did. It was, you can see it was actually capturing that data as I was turning them off and on before that, but it wouldn't trigger until, like, right over here, until it had armed itself. So you've got to really be aware at slower time bases, this becomes a big problem. It's not a problem at faster time bases like we saw at the start of the video because, well, it's filling that buffer practically instantly before you can actually move your arm over and manually trigger something. So let's see if the new Megazoom 5 Keysight ASIC makes any difference here. So I've got the new Keysight scope here, and let's take a look at the indicators up the top. So let's press the single button and take a look here. Triggered with a question mark straight away. But if I do it, like I just cycled the thing, trust me, I think you might have heard the relay there, and boom, it captured it like this. But not always. So it seems to have this weird, and I guess good, ability to instantly go into, like, as if it's like continually sampling in the background already, pre-filling that buffer, which would be fantastic. But if we go into single mode, like that, yeah, it's already showing it's already armed. But I found it doesn't always do that, and I haven't figured out under what circumstances it doesn't. I haven't been able to reproduce it on camera yet. Okay, let's try that again. I've left it stopped for a period of time, and boom, no, question mark again, but I swear I was able to get it to not show the question mark. So let's see if we're actually able to capture something. I'll start the timer there, and I'll trigger it right now. I've triggered it once, and let's see, let's wait and see if it's actually able, you'll notice, look, no question mark, I got it. I have no idea how I got it to be no question mark, but I triggered it, and it's, as you can see, we've more than waited for the time period. Well, it's now armed, and you can see that it is essentially now working the same way. So now if I trigger it, it'll do the business, right? So we shouldn't wait time for it to show up, and boom, there's our, yep, it showed up right there. So even with this new generation scope, the new Megazoom V ASIC, it does seem to work a bit different, but also like even more inconsistently. So I, haven't figured out that at all, and I won't go into the details here. I just wanted to point out that, your scope can do like weird things, and they haven't put like a big armed in green or something, ready, something like that. Give me a nice big indicator, or better yet, let me show you another scope that does it better. Okay, so what I've done is I've completely repowered this scope, and I haven't touched it yet, so it's repowered with the default settings. And let's try this again. So what I'll do is I'll trigger it straight away, we'll look at the indicator, and then I'll trigger my power supply like well before the 5 seconds and see if it actually triggers and see what happens. Here we go. And I'll trigger that now, okay? So I just triggered my power supply, and you notice it popped up with the question mark straight away, but then when I triggered it, it disappeared. So it has triggered, okay? Well, apparently, right? So it went from the armed mode with the question mark there, and I triggered it with the power supply, and now, look, it just popped back. It popped back into armed mode, and it hasn't displayed a waveform. What the heck? What's going on? Is that a bug, or is that a pebcac? Am I doing something wrong? But it said the question mark armed, and it didn't trigger. So, but now it probably will, right? So let's do it right now. No, it didn't. What the heck? What? No, it did, but you see, it didn't go from, like it did on the 3000, from trig, question mark, to trigged, like actual triggered with that dual terminology. Oh God, it's so confusing. But yeah, that's weird. And you'll notice that it didn't pop up on the screen straight away like it did on the 3000, which is a handy thing. You had to wait for that 5 seconds after you actually triggered the thing before the waveform would show up. And some other scopes operate like this as well, and that's kind of annoying. So it's good that the 3000 does that with the Megazoom 4 ASIC, but the Megazoom 5 on this scope, it doesn't do it. You have to wait the extra 5 seconds, but there's something weird going on here, and it's totally non-obvious, and I don't know. It's bizarre. So yeah, this can just get like frustratingly weird, especially if there's a buggy or inconsistent operation, which there seems to be. And I've also noticed that on the 3000 as well, where I swear it took 20 seconds at 1 second per division to arm at one time. But I can't reproduce that. We'll go single shot capture here, and I'll press my output, and ta-da! It's not triggering. Why is it not triggering? I thought I'd solved it, but it looks like I hadn't. Damn, okay. Let's look at this new Siglent SDS1204X HD series. Everything's exactly the same as before. We're at 1 second per division here. A trigger point in the middle. Everything's, normal trigger, nothing fancy whatsoever. So let's stop that, okay? And we'll put our scope in single shot mode like this, and see if you can tell if this one's ready or not. Did you pick it? Look at this bad boy. Look at this. Right next to the trigger level control, there's an LED there that actually says ready. So let's try that again. Run stop, okay? And we'll go single, and you can count it yourself. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Boom. Ready in the 5 seconds of what we expect with the 5 divisions on the screen, with our trigger point in the center like this. So that's how you implement a good trigger system and make it obvious to the user, either on the screen or, in this particular case, an LED on the front panel, right? So we'll do single, and I'll actually trigger it now within the first 5 seconds, couple of times, and it's not going to do it, right? Because it wasn't ready. Now it's ready. I can actually, wait for the 10 seconds to make sure it didn't actually capture anything. Nope. And now I will do it, and boom, the ready's gone away because it's triggered, and we just have to wait the extra 5 seconds, and bingo, we've got it on the screen. So that is a nice implementation. Use the Schwarz, Luke. Okay, we've got the new Rohde Schwarz MX04 series Bobby Dazzler. Let's see what we get here. Okay, everything's exactly the same as before, 1 second per division, yada yada. What we're looking for is trigger up here, somewhere in here, because there's no real indicator over here of any armed or anything. So let's press single and go. And I'll press that a couple of times. And it's waiting. You see, it switched from pre-trig to waiting at that 5 second mark. So obviously, once again, this only takes the 5 seconds to pre-fill that buffer. And now, and you can see that it didn't trigger. And now I will press it on and it'll trigger. It shows triggered. And we'll wait that 5 second period. And right about now, there's our waveform. No worries. Once again, it would have been nice to have that like in a bigger, big, red-green type indicator rather than just showing like pre-trig like that. Like we press single and it's now pre-trig. Okay, at least it's telling us, but red maybe, and then change it to green. I don't know, have a bigger font or something like that just to make it obvious that your scope is armed and ready to trigger. And how about this cute and affordable Rigol DHO814 series? Battery powered just because I can. Let's give this a go, shall we? Once again, all the same parameters that we had before. Our trigger sort of like information, like mode is kind of up here, but our trigger settings are over here, but our mode's over here. So let's go single and boom, like that. It says run, rabbit, run. And now it's waiting. So it took that 5 seconds there, waiting for that pre-trigger period. So run, what does that mean? Okay, yes, sampling is running, but once again, it's not telling you that it's actually like armed and ready to go. So just the lack of terminology and just the lack of obviousness that it's, trigger. Armed is like a good word, ready's a good word, something like that. So that's why I like that ready LED on the front of the Siglent. So let's test that again, and I'll cycle it a couple of times. Cycle in the first 5 seconds, and it shouldn't have triggered at all. No, we've waited our 10 seconds. No, it's not going to do it. Now it says wait, so we're waiting, and I will now trigger, and oh, boom. We got it's gone off scale there. Dumbass me must have this in times 10 mode. Oops. But I like how that showed up instantly, whereas the other scopes didn't do that. They sat there blank for like 5 seconds before, or if you got it set to a longer time base, if you got it set to, a minute per division, then you're going to have to wait 5 minutes before you even see your waveform. I like how that displayed that instantly. Thumbs up. It knows that you've triggered, so why not show that data straight away? So that just makes sense. I don't understand why the other scopes don't do that, but yeah, that's nice. So there you go. I hope you liked that video and found it useful and interesting, and something you may not have thought about before is that a pre-trigger or pre-arm time for your scope, and it's slow time bases that can really matter, especially like we're only using 1 second per division. If you use like, how far can we go on here? 50 seconds per division, but other scopes can go way slower than that, and you could wait forever. And we saw that some scopes have a nice indicator, like a LED front panel indicator that says ready. It's sort of, it tells you exactly that you're ready to trigger. Fantastic. Other scopes like this Keysight have this weird triggered and then the question mark thing. Some scopes will sit there and wait for that, all that extra post-trigger time period, 5 seconds in this case, before it'll display your waveforms. Others, like the Rigol, will display it straight away, like that. And some scopes, like this Keysight, can wait longer than the time period that you might think, given the time base and the number of divisions here. 5 seconds, you could wait double that. Or in one case, I'm sure in a previous video or edited in here, that I actually waited 20 seconds at 1 second per division before it did that. I'm sure that happened at one point. So yeah, Scopes is kind of like all over the shop in terms of this ability to tell you that they're ready to arm. And if you're not aware of this at slow time bases, then you could be doing what I was doing and why isn't my scope triggering? It's all set up correctly, and you could go down that rabbit hole of wasting a whole lot of time thinking that all your trigger settings are all wrong and your mode's wrong and everything else, and you might have hold off or something else weird happening, when that's not the case at all. It's simply the scope wasn't armed and ready because of that pre-trigger, pre-fill buffer time period. Anyway, if you found that video interesting, give it a big thumbs up. As always, discuss down below. And visit the EEVblog.store for my new merch. Look at this, it's even got an orange backlight. Oh, Bobby Dazzler. Catch you next time.